Sorry, didn't see you there. I was just trying to get ahead on the satire unit for AP Lit. An Ideal Husband, a very good book. Now, let me guess, you're here because you want to learn more about language and meaning in As I Lay Dying. Well, you see, I'm not exactly the best person to come to for that. They like to call me the incompetent professor, meaning that I don't know much about this book, or language and meaning, or anything regarding this entire topic. So let me tell you a little bit about As I Lay Dying by William Faulkner. But first, I don't think I'm dressed properly for this, so I'll have to change. Much better. My thesis statement regarding meaning and language in As I Lay Dying is, William Faulkner in his novel As I Lay Dying shows that words are empty and do not convey emotion, while actions and visual stimulation in the right circumstances do. This is shown through characterization and whether or not the characters are attributed visually and or physically. Now, the Freudian theory developed by Sigmund Freud is attributed to As I Lay Dying because it deals with the lack of communication, lack of verbal communication, and rather the physical communication or visual stimulation of communication mentally. So, Sigmund Freud developed a theory called psychoanalysis. It was developed to treat patients suffering from severe hysteria, a type of neurosis. A symptom of hysteria is the refusal to deal with unhappy or unpleasant news. This would have to be Addie Bunchren's death in As I Lay Dying, or Addie Bunchren's lack of love or feeling of love in her past. So thus the hysteric often seems constricted and naive. In his practice, Freud theorized that many hysterical symptoms with no physical cause, were actually expressions of socially unacceptable ideas that had been repressed. According to Freud, repressed ideas often retain their power and were later expressed without the patient's awareness of them. Though through psychoanalysis, many hysterical symptoms were relieved by helping the patient become aware of and accept unconscious impulses and desires. Freud divided the structure of human personality into three components: id, ego, and superego. And he liked to show it in the representation of the iceberg, which is where we coined the phrase, the tip of the iceberg. The id is the instinctual part of the personality and contains all the basic drives and emotions that come from the animal nature in humans. So, the id, as we can see, is beneath the surface in the unconscious category, meaning that we don't necessarily know that we're doing it, it's instinctual. And at the other extreme is the superego. It encompasses cultural values, ideals, and the rules of conduct acquired from parents. So we have the superego here, which is also in the unconscious area or below the surface. We don't necessarily know that we're doing it because we've been taught it from birth. So the id is always in conflict with the superego. An example of how the superego controls the id is when a person may wish to overeat but does not do so because it is socially unacceptable, and this is already in their subconscious. And we know that it's a bad thing to do, and it might result in becoming obese, which can bring negative social reactions. To mediate between the id and the superego, people gradually build a third structure called the ego, as we can see is in the preconscious and a little bit in the unconscious. The role of the ego is to see that the drives of the id are reasonably fulfilled without disturbing the superego. The ego is brought into play by anxiety, an emotion triggered by any potential conflict between the id and the superego. If the ego is not strong enough to manage the conflict, the result is neurosis. A compulsive person is a neurotic who spends an inordinate amount of time in keeping things clean and orderly, which symbolizes the effort to keep the id impulses under control. In contrast, the anxiety neurotic has few defenses and is upset by everything, which we can see through several of the characters in As I Lay Dying. Suggestible and easily frightened, the anxiety hysteric often shrinks from new experiences. Some patients transform their anxieties into physical complaints, resulting in hypochondria, an obsessive and unwarranted concern about personal health. Other patients translate their anxieties into fears that have little or no basis, in fact, called phobias. An example of a character in As I Lay Dying who uses physical actions or visual stimulation to deal with the trauma of their mother dying is Cash, who builds a coffin while his mother's still alive, a coffin for his mother. Here's a quote from page 76 in I believe it is Daryl's chapter. Daryl describes Cash as, Cash works on, half turned into the feeble light, one thigh, one pole thin arm braced. His face slopes into the light with a rapt, dynamic immobility above his tireless elbow. Below the sky's sheet lightning slumbers lightly. Against it the trees, motionless, are ruffled out to the last twig, swollen, increased as though thick and young. Cash looks once at the sky, then at the lantern. The saw has not faltered, the running gleam of its pistoning edge unbroken. Get something to cover the lantern, he says. The rain rushes suddenly down, without thunder, without warning of any sort. He is swept onto the porch upon the edge of it, and in an instant Cash is wet to the skin. Yet the motion of the saw has not faltered, as though it and the arm functioned in a tranquil conviction that rain was an illusion of the mind. He takes up the saw again. Again it moves up and down, in and out of the unhurried imperviousness as a piston moves in the oil, soaked, scrawny, tireless, with the lean, light body of a boy or an old man. Even in this instance, we see that Cash is not bothered by the rain or the fact that his mother is dying, or so it seems. He does not convey his emotions through verbal communication. He conveys it through his working with the saw and building the coffin, showing that he is devoted to his mother in this way, but he does not show it verbally. In addition to neurotic personalities in which anxiety is the chief symptom, there are also neurotic characters. Whereas the neurotic personality experiences too much anxiety and guilt, the neurotic character experiences too little. The psychopathic person can inflict pain and suffering with little guilt or remorse. Because neurotic characters do not suffer anxiety, they are less likely to come for treatment and are more difficult to treat. They tend to feel that it is the world, not themselves, that has the problems. An example of a neurotic character in As I Lay Dying is Addie Bundren, and this is revealed to us in her chapter that she narrates when she is dead. She says, I would look forward to the times when they faulted, they being her school children, so I could whip them. When the switch fell, I could feel it upon my flesh. When it welted and ridged, it was my blood that ran, and I would think with each blow of the switch, now you are aware of me. Now I am something in your secret and selfish life, who have marked your blood with my own forever and ever. It is shown here that Addie did not show emotion through her words because she felt that words were meaningless, as it is shown in this quote. That was when I learned that words are no good, that words don't ever fit even when they are trying to say at. When he was born, Cash was born, I knew that motherhood was invented by someone who had to have a word for it, because the ones that had the children didn't care whether there was a word for it or not. I knew that fear was invented by someone that had never had the fear, pride who never had the pride. I knew that it had been, not that they had dirty noses, but that we had to use another word, like spiders dangling their mouths from a beam, swinging and twisting and never touching, and that only through the blows of the switch could my blood and their blood flow as one stream. This shows that Addie has a very strong case of neurotic character because she's dealing with the trauma of having an affair in her life and only feeling passion through that. And the only way that she's able to show it is through beating the school children. Adler was another psychologist who was attributed to Sigmund Freud. And Adler was more concerned with the influence of social experience on a person's mental health. Adler was also the first to point out the significance of a child's order of birth in personality development, which is very important in the book As I Lay Dying. Another person who was attributed to Sigmund Freud, Horney, claimed that early treatment by parents, not anatomy, determined basic personality orientations. She also said that thoughtless, uncaring, or self-centered parents are the cause of anxiety in infants, leading to neurosis and feelings of inferiority later on in life. It is again in Addie's chapter that we find that the birth order of the children affects how their personalities were developed and how Addie feels about the children individually. It is shown in this quote. Then I found that I had Daryl. At first I would not believe it. Then I believed that I would kill Ance, who is Addie's husband. It was as though he had tricked me, hidden within us word, like within a paper screen, and struck me in the back through it. I had been tricked by words older than ants or love, and that the same word had tricked ants too, and that my revenge would be that he would never know I was taking revenge. And when Daryl was born, I asked ants to promise to take me back to Jefferson when I died, because I knew that father had been right, even when he couldn't have known he was right any more than I would have known when I was wrong. The final two quotes attributed to the birth order and infant anxiety in Addie's chapter are, "With Jewel, I lay by the lamp holding up my own head, watching him cap and suture it before he breathed. The wild blood boiled away and the sound of it ceased. Then there was only the milk, warm and calm, and I lying calm in the slow silence, getting ready to clean my house. I gave Aunt's Dewey Dell to negative Jewel." Just to clarify, Jewel was the child that Addie had with Whitfield, which was her affair. And this is the only true time where she felt that Jewel was her child, or that she had a child, because she truly felt love with Whitfield. Then I gave him Vardaman to replace the child I had robbed him of, and now he has 3 children that are his and not mine. And then I could get ready to die. Through these quotes, we see that Addie's personality and actions are shown through her actions. Her having an affair with Whitfield shows that only the physical action of loving him could bring out true emotion. That's why she truly loves Jewel, and why she felt lack of love and emotion for the others, because in the right circumstances, she did not feel love for Ants, which is why she does not feel love as strongly for her other children. After Addie had Daryl, she felt that she had been betrayed by Ants, and this then attributed later to Daryl's personality, in which he conveyed his most important thoughts with himself, and he didn't communicate them verbally. And his actions were often misconstrued to the other people in his life, including his neighbors. An example of this is in section 26 on page 1, when the narrator states, "We hadn't no more than passed Troll's Lane when Daryl begun to laugh, sitting back there on the plank seat with Cash, with his dead ma lying in her coffin at his feet, laughing. How many times I told him it's doing such things as that makes folks talk about him? I don't know." Then, later on in the novel, Daryl is on the train after he has snapped, after he lit the barn on fire because he wanted to cremate Addie because of the inhumanity in the world. That was one of his only physical ways of showing how he felt about the world, and it wasn't perceived very well. People thought he was crazy, so they sent him to an asylum. And this quote here shows how Daryl's talking in third person with himself, and how he truly has lost his mind. Daryl has gone to Jackson. They put him on the train, laughing, down the long car laughing, the heads turning like the head's vowels when he passed. "What are you laughing at?" I said. "Yes, yes, 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 yes." This last quote shows that Daryl only felt comfortable talking with himself, which is why he talked about himself in the third person. And he also talked about himself with the pronoun I in first person. This shows through the Freudian theory that this traumatic event and previous traumatic events made him snap and made him realize that only he can understand himself and nobody else will ever be able to. So, in conclusion, William Faulkner in this novel, As They Lay Dying, shows that words are empty and do not convey emotion, while actions and visual stimulation in the right circumstances do. This is shown through characterization and whether or not the characters are attributed visually and or physically to the novel. Well, thank you for watching my video, and I hope it was informational and instructional. I know As I Lay Dying may not be your favorite book. I know it's not mine. If it's not your cup of tea, just drink coffee. Have a lovely day, and enjoy your satire unit.